With Tears of the Kingdom less than 2 months away, Zelda fans across the world are starting to feel the excitement for the release of the new Zelda title. In true Nintendo fashion, the trailers that have been released show the perfect amount of footage and gameplay that isn't too revealing, but it raises more questions than it answers. Questions like what happened to Link's arm? What are his new abilities? What can we do? Where can we go? What happened to the Master Sword? Why is it broken? Who is that red-headed freak being pinned down by that mystical hand? What do these hieroglyphics mean? And who are the Zonai? And why do people think the Zonai are so important? Are they the ones who prophesized Ganon's return originally? What happened to Zelda? Is she dead? Did Hylia take back her immortal form? Are the Zonai a race of godlike people? Were they working in tandem with the Sheikah to develop technology, and are they the original creators of the Guardians? Or were the Zonai a rival clan of the Sheikah? Not like the Yiga clan as in enemies, but just like a competing clan. Are they the ones who initially sealed Ganon 10,000 years ago? If the Master Sword was broken, does that mean Demise's soul has been released? Is that who the voice belongs to in the trailer? There are so many questions and there are so many theories, and as a Zelda lover myself, I have to throw in my 2 cents. It is absolutely incredible that The Legend of Zelda has come this far since its first installment almost 40 years ago. Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild are the titles that just remind you of where Zelda came from. These games just make you question the other titles like Ocarina of Time and Skyward Sword, Twilight Princess, Wind Waker, and everyone wants to know, how is it all connected? And the big question, how does Tears of the Kingdom fit in the timeline? Before we launch into this massive discussion of Zelda theories and lore, I do have to confess that I did prefer when there was no official timeline. I liked that there didn't have to be a connection between the different Zelda titles, except for the direct sequels like Ocarina of Time into Majora's Mask or A Link to the Past into Link's Awakening. Because The Legend of Zelda was just that, a legend. How awesome would it have been if The Legend of Zelda was just a collection of stories about a hero who went through trials and tribulations to become more courageous, wiser, and more powerful? It could have been as simple as Hylian parents telling their children bedtime stories of a hero named Link, and these stories would teach them values of morality and life lessons. Or maybe these stories were told around a campfire by travelers or merchants, and each time that the story was told, a fact was lost or misinterpreted, or maybe a storyteller embellished a fact to make the story seem more incredible and fantastic. The same way stories throughout history have been told. Let's make an example. I will tell you a story of a young courageous hero, and you tell me what Zelda title it's from. There once was a young hero who traveled across the land of Hyrule. With the Master Sword in hand, he sought to bring peace to the realm. With a faithful guide helping him in his quest, he found himself in many dangerous situations. There was a time during his adventure where he found himself in a haunted place. As he ventured through the darkness, he encountered 4 malicious ghosts, more commonly known as Poes. When the Poes first noticed the hero, they ran and hid throughout the dark dwelling. As they did so, part of this dwelling was sealed shut, and in order to make his way deeper into the haunted site, the hero had to hunt down the Poes one by one and vanquish them. After a time, the hero managed to vanquish the Poes, and while doing so, found a new weapon that would aid him in his journey. The hero made his way deeper into the haunted sanctum and came across an evil incarnation. Using the weapon he had found earlier in conjunction with the Master Sword, the hero was able to defeat this evil, and peace had returned. The haunted site was now free of all evil. Now you tell me, what was that story about? I kind of left the details ambiguous on purpose. But was that the story of the Forest Temple from Ocarina of Time, or was it the story of the Arbiter's Grounds from Twilight Princess? Now, some people will say that the Arbiter's Grounds is just a throwback to the Forest Temple in Ocarina of Time, which yes it is, but many things in Twilight Princess are intentionally a throwback to Ocarina of Time. Temple of Time is one of them. The boss Armor Goma is definitely an homage to Goma from the Deku Tree in Ocarina of Time. There's no denying that. But my point is that these games didn't need a timeline. The Arbiter's Grounds and the Forest Temple could have been the same story, just told by different people with different facts or misinterpreted knowledge. Maybe the Arbiter's Grounds was always in the forest and not the desert, or maybe the Forest Temple was actually supposed to be the Spirit Temple in the desert, and the Spirit Temple would actually have spirits in it. But over time, these facts became lost and the stories become confused and muddled, and that's what the magic of legends are. They're fables, they're stories. We have stories like this all over the world. We've got the stories of Hercules from the ancient Romans. We've got stories of Achilles from ancient Greece, Perseus, Odysseus, Hector, all of these people, all of these heroes capable of such feats of strength and valor. And do you think all of these stories were true? Probably not. But they were told in order to entertain and inspire. So when it comes to The Legend of Zelda and when they introduced the official timeline of events, it sort of took away a little bit of the magic for me. What was once a free flow and fluid collection of stories had suddenly become rigid, and Zelda lovers like myself started to nitpick and find plot holes throughout the entire series. One example of a question that people like to ask is, why does the Master Sword always change location? Sometimes it's in a forest, or sometimes it's in the Temple of Time, or in a sacred temple somewhere else. Why doesn't it stay in one location? And people always come up with different theories that the temple was in the forest, but over time it became decrepit and it was like dilapidated, and then the temple just sort of eroded and the forest took over, and but the Master Sword stayed in place, and then things just sort of like grew around it. But I don't know, I don't buy it, not all the time. It's just very convenient for that to happen. But the point is that people started to look for connections between games after the fact, like how does A Link to the Past connect to Skyward Sword? A Link to the Past was released in 1991 and Skyward Sword was released in 2011. So does that mean that Nintendo were creating this game tailoring to the fact that this timeline has now connected each Zelda to one another? Doesn't that make it seem a little bit more restrictive in the creation of your game? Like, you have to make sure that the plot is so solid that it connects to previous games in the series. A recent question that's come up, similar to the Master Sword question, is that in the trailers for Tears of the Kingdom, we see floating islands. So does that mean that it's somehow related to the City in the Sky from Twilight Princess, or is it turning into Skyloft from Skyward Sword? With each new installment, questions are answered, but even more questions are raised. This doesn't mean I don't love Zelda. This is my absolute favorite video game franchise in the history of video games. I just wanted to share my opinion on the whole timeline thing. But for now, let's get back to the Tears of the Kingdom. Let's address some questions I had at the start of the video. We'll start with the basic ones and then we'll move into the more difficult questions. First couple of questions, where can we go and what can we do? Now this seems pretty obvious. We can go to the sky. Amazing. We have full access to Hyrule like we did in Breath of the Wild, but now we have the added feature of traversing the sky. There is some new ability that allows Link to travel up to the islands in the sky, as well as portal through walls apparently. We see a flying machine and a variety of other vehicles, a new golem type enemy, new flying type enemies which look like Kagaroks from Twilight Princess to me. The bokoblins have been changed and now they've got like horn accessories and stuff, which looks pretty cool. Looks a little bit more deadly. There's a boss bokoblin who looks like he's the leader of a bokoblin encampment, which you might have to defeat or take control of to unlock a certain area, much like the towers operated in Breath of the Wild. There is also what looks like a potential Redead, which is absolutely terrifying. Those Redeads have always been horrifying to me. But nevertheless, exciting things are being thrown at us. Our cup runneth over, so to speak. Moving on to something a little more interesting. What happened to Link's arm? Maybe he loses his arm entirely and is replaced with a high-tech prosthetic. Whatever the case may be, it acts similar to the Sheikah Slate from Breath of the Wild. But the coloring of this arm is what interests me the most. It is the same color as the wisps and the mystical spirals and vortices that you see throughout the trailer. And it is the same color as the hand that is pinning down this red-headed corpse. With that in mind, it might be safe to assume that whoever is responsible for these mystical vortices as well as this sealing hand is also the one who has gifted Link his new abilities. We hear Zelda say,
"Please, lend him your power."
Who is she speaking to? Is she speaking to Hylia? The mystical green color is a sign of Farol, so she may be speaking to the goddess of courage herself. Or maybe she's speaking to the Zonai. Maybe she's pleading with them for their help. But when it comes to trailers, you can't take everything at face value. This could be a voiceover from a different part of the game. Speaking of that hand, what is it pinning down? What is that red-headed freak? A lot of people saying that it's Ganon. It's gotta be Ganon. It's gotta be Ganondorf. Look at the Gerudo jewelry and the adornments, and yeah, that is pretty convincing. But at the same time, I'm not so sure. At the end of Breath of the Wild, after defeating beast form Ganon, we see Zelda use magic against him. Now, Did she seal him away, or did she absolutely obliterate him? The main quest in the quest log says destroy Ganon, and at the end of the game it comes up and says complete. So does that mean Ganon has been destroyed? But we also just witnessed what looked like Ganon being absorbed by the sun and swallowed into a black hole. After the game is complete, there is another cutscene in which Zelda says to Link,
Although Ganon is gone for now, there is still so much more for us to do.
Ganon is gone for now, which implies he might come back. There's only been a few instances where Ganon was actually slain, those being Twilight Princess, A Link to the Past, the Oracle games, and Wind Waker. The Ganon from A Link to the Past was resurrected by the villain named Yuga in A Link Between Worlds, so that Ganon definitely wasn't sealed, because to use the word resurrect implies that the person had died. So in Breath of the Wild, was Ganon utterly destroyed, or is he biding his time waiting to break free from yet another prison? Something we are all desperate to find out. But that brings me to another point. After Zelda said that Ganon is gone for now, she follows it up by saying that she can no longer hear the voice inside the sword.
I can no longer hear the voice inside the sword.
Has the spirit of the Master Sword been diminished? Is that why it was able to be broken? Because a broken Master Sword would lead to many misfortunes. The sword that seals the darkness, the blade of evil's bane, is no more. At the end of Skyward Sword, when Link defeats Demise, the primeval king of evil, Demise's soul is sealed inside the Master Sword. So is it safe to assume that if that sword was ever destroyed, would that soul be free? Is it possible that the malice underground was calling to Zelda and Link to lure them down there? Did they find the corpse of the original Demon King? And by breaking the Master Sword, did his soul return to his body? Or is that Ganon's body being possessed by Demise? Body possession isn't impossible. We saw Ganon do it to Zelda in Twilight Princess, and we also saw Ganon working through the Wizard Aghanim in A Link to the Past. So it might not be that far-fetched for Demise's soul to take over Ganon's body. Villains have combined in the past. Yuga combined with Ganon in A Link Between Worlds to become Ganon. Are we about to see the original evil in Hyrule come back to life? That, to me, would be a very interesting story. But let's rewind for a second and talk about that mystical hand that's pinning down this corpse. It's obviously some form of ancient magic or tech imbued with magic. With the color and the tech in mind, I want to talk about something that has people going crazy. It's the game's box art. Now, I understand where people are coming from with this, but I really don't want the Tears of the Kingdom to be at the end of the timeline and then turn the timeline back on itself. A lot of Zelda lore experts are saying that this symbol is an Ouroboros, an ancient symbol depicting a serpent or a dragon eating its own tail. Throughout our history, we've seen ancient civilizations use this symbol of an Ouroboros, usually with one or two heads. The design of this Ouroboros is very reminiscent of the dragon heads and dragon statues that you see throughout Hyrule in Breath of the Wild, particularly in the Zonai ruins. In ancient Egypt, the Ouroboros represented formless disorder that surrounded the orderly world and was involved in the world's renewal, like New Year's pretty much. Then over time, say thousands and thousands of years later, a guy from Italy named Servius noted that the snake eating its own tail represented the cyclical nature of the year. However, this symbol on the Tears of the Kingdom box art has two heads. A two-headed Ouroboros is a symbol for destruction and recreation. Much like the change in seasons, when summer turns to autumn, trees tend to die, leaves turn brown and drop off, animals go into hibernation, but when winter is over, spring returns, and with it comes new life. This double Ouroboros represents balance, much like the yin-yang symbol. This is no different than Ganon being defeated by Link and then returning, or when Link is defeated by Ganon and then is reborn into knighthood in A Link to the Past. The cycle begins anew if either of them are defeated. I will concede that this symbol on the box art has something to do with time, but I don't think it has anything to do with the Zelda timeline. I don't think this is a prequel to Skyward Sword. The goddess Hylia imparts a message onto Link from the edge of time, implying that there was a beginning. But a circle doesn't have a beginning. A loop has no beginning. If the timeline was in a loop, then this sentence wouldn't make any sense. And if there is a beginning, there is certainly going to be an end. I think this double Ouroboros has something to do with Link's new abilities. When I look at this box art, I am immediately reminded of the Gates of Time from Skyward Sword. Round objects with teeth that look like cogs on a gear wheel. Also, let's look at the trailer once more. We have reversed footage of this water droplet, probably a tear, but also listen to the sound effects. This is reversed sound we can hear. I'm confident that one of Link's new abilities is time manipulation. We had the stasis rune in Breath of the Wild, which could freeze enemies and objects in time, so why wouldn't we be able to go a little bit further with that and just manipulate time altogether? There's also the fact that Link has short hair in one part of the trailer and then flowing locks in another part of the trailer. Or maybe it's like an Ocarina of Time thing where he can transfer his consciousness into a future version of himself. Or maybe he's even connecting with the past version of the hero. Does that sound familiar? That is probably my wildest prediction for this game, but hey, feel free to leave a comment and we can talk about it some more. But for now, let's get back to some more simpler speculation and theories. The vortex, or these multiple vortices that we see, to me they look like gateways into the underground of Hyrule, or are they like portals from A Link to the Past that allowed the player to warp into the Dark World? That would be amazing! Is the source of Ganon's original seal in the Sacred Realm? Let's take a look at the lyrics from Cass's song in Breath of the Wild. But Ganon lurked beneath the surface, strengthening its jaws, so the ancient people of Hyrule set out to help the cause. Their efforts bore fruit in an automated force, to help avert calamity by sealing it at its source. Maybe that's what Zelda and Link are looking for, so that they can end this cycle once and for all. If this theory is true and Zelda and Link have found the Calamity's original seal, then it will definitely put up a fight. And maybe Zelda does meet her end. I mean, it's highly unlikely, but it's still a possibility. We see Link kneeling before a white-garbed figure bathed in a golden glowing light, which could be Zelda's spirit or the goddess Hylia herself. But if Zelda does perish, does that mean the Triforce of Wisdom is up for grabs? There isn't much told about the Triforce in Breath of the Wild, but there is heavy symbolism everywhere. Statues, garments, jewelry, belt buckles, heaps of different stuff. Maybe the people of Hyrule don't want to rely on the power of the Triforce anymore. Maybe they came to the realization that if people continue to chase the power of the Triforce, then they will forever be at war. If you remove the desire for power, then conflict ceases to exist. But the Triforce is so intrinsic to the life of Hyrule. For thousands of years, faith in the Triforce was sown so deeply that people couldn't fathom life without it. So with people disregarding the Triforce, Ganon made his move and reminded them that there were only two people who could stand up to him. Not champions selected by the royal family. Albeit great warriors, but nothing compared to the one who wields the Triforce of power. The only people who could stand up to Ganon were those chosen by the goddesses. 1. A person of true virtue, and 2. A person capable of outstanding courage with the spirit of the hero.